Hello, I'm going to talk about the idea of being authentic. Yes, what does it mean to be authentic? Does that mean saying whatever you want to say? Being real? Being true to ourselves. We've heard these terms before: being true to yourself, being honest, being authentic. But very few of us are able to be authentic. Why? Because we are groomed, we are educated to think of others before thinking of ourselves, to love others before we love ourselves. So being authentic is, well, you're saying what you want to say. Uh, people love Trump because he's more authentic. He says what's on top of his head. He says what he feels, what he thinks. Well, what is he thinking? So being authentic, does that mean hurting people? Does that mean you're going to tell the truth? Your opinions of someone or what they're doing you don't agree with? It's very dangerous to be authentic because we're so, again, groomed to consider others before ourselves, to love others before ourselves. So being authentic, you're taking a risk. However, there's another level of being authentic. And this is what I've learned from Spinoza and Gurdjieff teachings. I've studied the philosophy of Spinoza, and I've studied Gurdjieff's works for over, say, 50 years. I was fortunate to have a mentor, a teacher, to help me, guide me through the difficult concepts of Spinoza's ethics. You probably have seen this book before. This is the book called The Ethics, Spinoza's Ethics. It's written by, or say, translated by Elwes, and it's a Dover edition. It includes the improvement of our understanding. So this is probably my 10th book over the last 50 years. However, studying Spinoza, I first had to understand Gurdjieff, because Gurdjieff, again, is I would say the beginning of the work that I do. Is a stepping stone. It's much simpler to understand, but yet concepts are difficult. Gurdjieff said some profound things in this book called In Search of the Miraculous, written by one of his students his name was Ouspensky. What do I love about Gurdjieff? He talks about being authentic, being truthful. He said that man is asleep. But what does he mean by being asleep? And he said it's possible for man to awaken. What does he mean by being awake? Also, he mentioned about being a master of oneself. What does that mean? So I've taken these concepts and I've been able to, say, put a book together called The Way of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. I've used their ideas in case studies with my former students and current students, how to apply Spinoza and Gurdjieff and learning how to be authentic. Now, authentic is not just saying what you feel and what you think, but is actually a gift to another individual. Being authentic is telling the truth, but not to hurt someone, but to elevate someone's position, their attitude about life or themselves. So the higher level of authenticity is having love and caring with your communication. What does that look like? Let me see if I can give an example. One of my friends, I live in this building for senior citizens. It's a low-cost housing for seniors in Santa Monica, a very expensive area. I couldn't live here if it wasn't for this senior complex, low-income seniors. Anyway, I met a friend and a new friend. I'll call him David. Now, David was complaining about he doesn't have any friends. And And when he gets a friend, he can't seem to keep them. So I was wondering about that. I was asking him, now this is important before being authentic, asking questions. I would say, David, let me ask you, when you meet someone, how do you do that? So here, the conversation is helping the individuals reflect upon themselves. How do you do that, David? The next question is, what do you say? And I might ask, how is your listening? Are you able to listen? Do you have a tendency to argue? Do you have a tendency to complain? So I might say these things so you can see that I'm being direct, but not offensive. So I learned with Gurdjieff and Spinoza's works over the years how to be authentic. Now, I'm not at that level all the time. Actually, the work of Spinoza and Gurdjieff over the years has given me a strong sense of self-identity. What does that mean? It means that I'm more concerned about how I think rather than your opinion of me. I'm more concerned about what I'm writing rather than consider your pointing out errors in my writing. If you point out an error, that's great. I can learn from that. So being authentic is learning about oneself, about learning how to improve one's character. What does that mean, improving one's character? Now, we are all born into an environment. And that environment might be good, might be not so good. You might receive love or not being touched or loved at all. You may receive guidance and encouragement and security, and you may not have that at all. I was into, my family were 11 siblings. One of my sisters died before I was born. I was number 9. And my parents were from Mexico. So I'm first generation Mexican American. But my parents were so involved in trying to survive, put food on the table, have a place to live, pay the bills, do the wash, do the cleaning, do the cooking. A lot of work. 10 children. Can you believe that? And my father was self-employed, and he was a grower of lilies. And certain times he was very successful. But they were so busy learning to survive or putting the effort to survive. They didn't have time for loving, for listening, for guidance, to pay attention. So our siblings desperately wanted attention, desperately wanted love. And consequently, I and all my siblings have a deep feeling of inferiority and inadequacy and feeling unimportant. And consequently, there's a lot of drugs in my family. And ways to escape. My father had a short temper and was very impatient. So I developed, the way I solve problems is by anger. If I don't get things my way, I express my anger and I will break things just like my father. What this work has done is help me look at myself with the help of my teacher. My teacher encouraged me to put in the effort to awaken my mind. And this is what Gurdjieff talks about, the idea of being awake. But he doesn't really clarify what he means. So I've taken Gurdjieff and developed it into a much clearer idea of what he's communicating. An awakened state is a higher intelligence state of being. It includes reason and intuition. Now, this higher state of being is to look at oneself. But how did you do that? You just can't willfully change and look at oneself. There's a process. It's called journaling. And I have a book, or I have a journal I wanted to show you. I put in here situations, circumstances, events that trigger my emotions. Now, Gurdjieff says something very important. He says, to know thyself is you must begin to look at oneself, self-knowledge. Now, you heard the word about self-knowledge. I think Socrates and others said the most and greatest knowledge is to know thyself. So Gurdjieff had this idea about to look at oneself. And I took it a step further and got a journal. And to look at oneself is to look at your emotions. Now, this is where Spinoza comes up. Spinoza talks about, in the third part of his ethics, about emotions. He said this: knowledge without emotion is abstract. You need emotions. What is that emotion? Love and desire. Positive emotions. But yet, so when you have reactions to the event that occurred, journal the event and write down the emotion that you felt. I felt pain. I felt anger. I felt anxiety. I felt stress. I feel angry. I feel hate. So these emotions we feel all the time. Example, road rage. The individual who cuts in front of you may not be aware of you at all, but you took it personally. You had to put on the brakes. You had to slow down. And right away, you have a reaction. I feel pain. Why the pain? Because my desire was interfered with. My desire was going 65, 70 miles an hour. And this guy or this woman cut in front of me. I had to drop down to 45 miles an hour. So automatically, you didn't willful it. You didn't want this. It just happens. Pain, hate, and anger are the emotions that react or say are triggered when our desires are not met. Again, another example. I go to a restaurant. I'm going to meet a new friend or meet an old friend. But he has a tendency to be 10 to 20 minutes late. And he doesn't live that far, but he gets distracted or she gets distracted. So I'm sitting there waiting, and he may not show up. But if he does show up, I've been waiting there for about 20 minutes. I'm disturbed. I say, Alan, you're late all the time. And here my coffee is cold. I had my third cup of coffee. Now I have to leave. This really gets me upset. Why do you make me wait? So you can complain and not say, I'm not going to meet with you anymore. Or you can take another reaction. Well, before I get into the other reaction, I feel pain because my desire was not met. I wanted Alan to meet me at say 11 o'clock, and he shows up at 11:30. I feel pain. I feel hate. I'm angry. Those are basic emotions. Now, the idea is to understand the definitions of them. Is that what you think? See, this is what this does. This process does. It awakens the higher mind. It's a process. I'll give you another example. Louis C.K. Yes, he's done some terrible things, but prior to that, he's a great comedian, and he he makes comedy of his personal life, but very insightful. He was on the Conan show for years back, talking about these instruments called iPhones or smartphones. And he says, everybody's using this, and he found that he doesn't want his children to use these cell phones because they're such a distraction. People don't communicate with each other. You'll be amazed if you have children, and boy and a girl, whatever, and they have their cell phones in their back, and they're communicating with each other by cell phone. And in the back seat of your car, you go to a little trip or something. So you go to a restaurant, and we all do this. You have so much to say, unless you have a lot of commonality in your conversations, especially a married couple. They've been together for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. They don't say too much anymore. They look at their cell phone because the cell phone has so much information, a lot of good information, and there's a lot of questionable information. But the idea is how to activate the mind. So back to Conan or Louis C.K. Louis C.K. saw that the cell phone is a big distraction, which is true, but it also it's a very useful and important instrument. But Louis C.K. says this: the cell phone distracts us from our pain. We don't want to look at our pain. So he did this. He was driving along he was listening to the radio, and an old tune came up and caused him pain because it reminded him of an incident in high school. And he decided he wanted to turn off the radio. He said, I'll do this. I'm going to pull over and listen to that radio, that music, the sound, and go back. And I just want to feel my pain. I want to stay with my pain. And this is a difficulty we all have. We do not want to stay with our pain. It's discomfort. Why should you? But there's something in it. Louis C.K. found something important in the pain. He said this, and I recommend you, it's only about less than 5 minutes. Look it up on YouTube. And it's about Louis C.K. and the cell phone. He says this: he stayed with the pain when he listened to music because it reminded him of losing his first girlfriend. It was so painful. He still has this memory. Girl he loved, and she rejected him eventually. When she fell for another guy. But he wanted to stay with this pain. He didn't run from it. And we have all the tendency to run from our pain. He stayed with the pain, and he said good things would follow. And that's what I do. You must stay with the pain, surrender to it. Because what is the pain saying? I feel helpless. I feel hopeless. I don't know what to do. That is the reality. But we run from that reality. So from pain, we go into hate. Because in hate, the definition of hate is pain accompanied or associated with someone as a cause. And so the idea of surrender to the pain is to awaken the mind. Because the ego state, now this is important, we all have an ego. We are egoistic. We have a personality that expresses the ego. Now the ego is important. It's part of our survival mechanism. Without an ego, we could not survive and exist. So an ego nature is we learn from our environment how to exist, how to live, how to communicate, how much effort we're going to put in on problems. We get educated. We learn how to cook. We learn how to drive. We have relationships. We have families. It's all under the character of ego. However, Gurdjieff and Spinoza, and there are many others, have talked about another state of mind, a higher state of mind. You heard of Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung studied with Sigmund Freud, and I think these two individuals really began to look at human nature much deeper. And now, today, there's individuals like Dr. Savali and Dr. Gabor Mate, two individuals that I identify with. I read their books, and Dr. Savali says that the parents are not conscious. She wrote a book called The Conscious Parent. But in reality, parents are not conscious of their children. They want their children to succeed, to be like them. They want little children to be like puppets. They don't realize that the child is a living, dynamic being. And now Dr. Gabor Mate, wonderful lecturer, teacher, doctor, has a great history. He's on YouTube. He has such insightful insights of human nature. They both do. So I use their works as part of my work because they complement what I do. Again, psychology has been able to do a lot of good things, but it's not enough. And that's where Spinoza has given me the tools to communicate ideas that may help you learn how to be authentic, to communicate not just what you feel, not to reject the other, but to communicate and to help and lift another individual. So I hope this is helpful. If you want to listen to my other videos, I have over 50 videos on YouTube. You can join me on Patreon. I have new videos coming out on Patreon. It's only $5 a month. Or you can find me on Facebook, and on TikTok, Instagram. Hope to hear from you and grow and feed your spiritual intelligence, because that's what this is, a higher level intelligence. And the ego is our lower level of existence. And Gurdjieff says something important. The ego and personality can become the source and material for our growth. So enjoy your life. Do your best to look at yourself and learn how to grow from that experience. Thank you for listening.